Tonight, high stakes.
I've always wanted to create custom artwork for weddings ever since I was a little girl.
A Christian website designer's free speech challenge to a Colorado law that wedding vendors must serve all ceremonies, including same-sex weddings.
That even if somebody's religious beliefs are unpopular, that doesn't mean you get to silence them.
Plus, deja vu. Georgia's runoff election for senator comes down to the wire again. And Elon Musk releases the Twitter files.
The problem the Democrats should have is, why were they so scared of the laptop story?
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Free speech versus anti-discrimination. In Washington, D.C., thank you for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder. Tonight, the Supreme Court is confronted with a major case pitting the First Amendment protecting free speech and religious freedom against anti-discrimination law protecting LGBTQ rights in Colorado. Protesters on both sides out in force today in front of the Marble Palace. The 9 justices on the High Court hearing arguments on whether business owners can refuse to work on same-sex weddings due to religious beliefs and free speech. A CBN News senior Washington correspondent Tara Merchner has our top story from the Supreme Court tonight. Tara?
Jenna, Lori Smith wants to expand her business to include wedding websites, but she only wants to tell the stories of brides and grooms through God's lens. She does not want to create them for same-sex couples.
Christian, and as a Christian, I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman.
The case 303 Creative versus Elena's is a challenge by a Colorado website designer to a state law that bars businesses that are open to the public from discriminating against gay people or announcing intent to do so.
I'm never refusing a project based on who's requesting the work, but the message that I'm being asked to pour my time, talents into promoting and celebrating.
Colorado, though, sees denying service to same-sex marriage as discrimination.
If you're open to the public, you need to accommodate everybody. That's a core of our civil rights law, and it has deep roots in American law.
After several years of litigation, Smith's case reached the Supreme Court after the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against Smith. Judge Timothy Timkovich, writing for that court's minority, pointed out, the majority takes the remarkable and novel stance that the government may force Ms. Smith to produce messages that violate her conscience. Taken to its logical end, the government could regulate the messages communicated by all artists. Today, Smith's attorneys focused on their clients' free speech.
She serves all people, deciding what to create based on the message, not who requests it. But Colorado declares her speech a public accommodation and insists that she create and speak messages that violate her conscience.
The company just cannot refuse to serve gay couples, as it seeks to do here, just as the Christmas store cannot announce no Jews allowed.
This case follows a narrow ruling in favor of a Colorado baker represented by the same conservative group, who argued he should not be forced to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple.
If it's not something I will say, then it's not something I will write on a cake.
The Heritage Foundation says the stakes are high for religious liberty and the First Amendment.
Regardless of how the Supreme Court rules, and we're hoping that they rule in favor of free speech, it will be a ruling that will ultimately bind everyone, regardless of religious perspectives on marriage.
And in the end, the Supreme Court will decide if one's rights overrule the other. Meantime, Smith's lawyers insist that a ruling for Smith would be beneficial to both viewpoints and all ideas. Jenna.
Terry, did you get a sense today which way the justices might be leaning?
Well, certainly it's far too early to tell. They heard arguments for about 2.5 hours, and there's been some talk that the conservative bloc was somewhat sympathetic to Smith today. But at the same time, they also acknowledged that it's different when an artist is conveying messages and others are selling goods and services. At the same time, the liberal bloc basically was really concerned that a win for Smith might open the door for discrimination or denying services based on race, gender, and other identities. So, Jenna, we'll expect a ruling at the end of June, but a long way to go in this case.
All right, we will see Tara Merchiner for us on a chilly evening at the Supreme Court. Tara, thank you. Well, it is election eve in Georgia tonight. The Senate runoff for incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and challenger Herschel Walker is tomorrow. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka has been tracking this race throughout the entire election season. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Jenna, almost time to end this midterm election cycle, right? Well, at one point, analysts predicted that this race would be the one that could tip the scales for control of the Senate. Since Democrats have already locked up the chamber, the race might not be the priority it was once thought to be, but that doesn't mean it's any less important. Vote counts as both candidates make their closing arguments around the Peach State.
This is what I'm going to tell you. We are the people of God. And no one is going to hurt God's people. Not on my watch they will, because I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect Georgia. I'm going to protect the United States of America.
I'm glad to be in a church tonight because it is my faith that has driven me into public service. You don't have a senator who used to be a pastor. You have a pastor in the Senate.
While Warnock edged out Walker in November's general election in a close and contested race, neither candidate got more than 50% of the vote, triggering this runoff. Walker hopes Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's popularity and support can get him across the finish line.
That's why I'm backing Herschel, and I hope you'll join me in voting for him too.
While Warnock brought back former President Obama in the closing days.
Some folks are asking, well, if Democrats already have control of the Senate, why does this matter? What's the difference between 50 and 51? The answer is a lot.
The Senate has been deadlocked 50-50 for the past 2 years, with the vice president being the deciding vote. A Warnock victory would give Democrats more power, something not lost on current members.
The difference between a 50-50 Senate, which I've seen over the last 2 years, and a 51-49 Senate is pretty significant. Just look at the way our committees are structured. Our committees are evenly divided. That means Democrats can't pass legislation out of the committees without at least one Republican supporting them.
51-49 is very close. We have a country that needs us to come together. The country wants unity. Whether it's 50-50, 51-49, we have got to work on what's best interest for the citizens of this great country and bringing it back together.
A condensed early voting period for the runoff has shattered previous records, with more than 1.8 million Georgians already voting before Election Day.
You know, people just show up, and you don't know how many will show up. But for what we're seeing right now, voters are energized on both sides of the aisle. A lot of money is being spent here on TV. I'm sure people can't wait for that to be over. But I think we'll have strong turnout on Tuesday.
Now, here's a pretty interesting stat with all those early voters. After analyzing state public voting data, GeorgiaVotes.com determined that almost 80,000 people who did not vote in the general election in November have already early voted for the runoff. Matt Gelka, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Matt. And here with us now is Tim Head, Executive Director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Tim, welcome. Deja vu all over again in Georgia. It's still down to the wire. In your opinion, how likely is it we see a definitive winner tomorrow?
Well, I don't know about definitive. We're really headed for another one of those photo finishes here in Georgia, and I think that first of all, we're going to see probably rain, cold and rain, so that means long lines, which also means if you're standing in line, they'll prolong the ability to vote throughout until basically everybody has voted. So I wouldn't be surprised if we still have people voting until close to 9 p.m. And so it's going to take a little while to tabulate these things, and probably well into the night, including, the early vote and absentee ballots.
Today in Arizona, they officially certified their 2022 election results. Democrat Katie Hobbs winning the governor's race there. How likely, Tim, do you think it is Republican candidate Carrie Lake files suit protesting the election? And where would a case like that go?
Well, I mean, it does sound like she and the rest of her team feel very strongly that they have a case. Clearly there were at least some irregularities and probably some disenfranchisement, and so I would venture. So ultimately, it certainly is going to be a federal case, and so that's probably going to be filed in a favorable venue for that, and ultimately it will end up in the appellate court there, and very likely once that is resolved, end up at the Supreme Court. So I think that we're probably still looking at a few weeks before that's ultimately determined.
I want to go ahead and shift gears here, Tim, to Twitter. New CEO Elon Musk blasting back at former President Trump over Trump's Truth Social post calling for a termination of the U.S. Constitution over the 2020 election results. Musk writing on Twitter that the Constitution is greater than any president, end of story. Tim, is the Tesla billionaire the new voice of reason these days?
Well, I think, by all means, we're well aware of President Trump's complaints that are well lodged and frankly, in many cases, well founded. But I do think that in this situation that Elon Musk's kind of prevailing view there, I think is probably the best North Star in this situation. The Constitution really does have to be our governing document. Whether we like the results or don't like results, we all want to be playing from that same set of rules, if you will.
Do you think former President Trump is losing some of his base on these repeated claims?
Well, it's that's certainly to be seen. I think that it's important for leaders to continue to be leading and looking towards tomorrow, and not purely just kind of camping on yesterday. And I think that's one of the challenges that he's immensely popular with a huge part of his base. But those kind of those persuadable voters are really more interested in 2023 and 2024 and less interested in 2020 or 2021.
Yeah. And we certainly saw that in the midterm elections. Candidates who were looking forward tended to do better. Tim, just a few seconds left here, but the Senate passed a Same-Sex Marriage Act, heads to the House this week, even as progressive Democrats in the House are saying it doesn't go far enough. Could progressives tank this bill, or is this, reverse psychology on their part ahead of Thursday's big vote?
Well, it's a good question, and I think probably at this point it's going to be a tall order for this not to pass in the U.S. House, partly just because I think that Speaker Pelosi, as she's leaving office, is seeing this as really kind of a signature accomplishment from her perspective. So I suspect it'll still pass, although by all means, ultra progressives always want more, it seems, these days.
All right, Tim Head with the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Thank you so much. Great to see you, Tim.
Thank you so much, Jenna. God bless.
Well, the triple-demic, respiratory illness, the flu, and COVID, all hitting the U.S. Coming up, how you can stay healthy over the holidays. Welcome back. 44 states are seeing high levels of respiratory illness, according to the CDC. This as health officials continue to warn of a triple-demic that includes the flu, respiratory issues, and COVID-19. Children's hospitals across the country dealing with a surge in RSV, with millions of children encountering it for the first time after pandemic restrictions. And experts warn the U.S. could expect a worse than normal flu season. The number of new COVID cases remaining mostly steady in about 300,000 a day in recent weeks, according to CDC data. And joining us now is Diana Finkel, Director of the Infectious Disease Fellowship Program at Rutgers Medical School. Diana, good evening. Thank you for joining us. So 44 states with high levels of respiratory illness. How likely is it the U.S. sees a surge of the flu and COVID cases on top of it all? And are hospitals at risk of being overwhelmed here?
Well, it's very likely that we're going to be seeing a surge of all three, since we're actually already seeing it already. However, no different than any other year in terms of staying healthy, we should go ahead and take the same common precautions we generally take, such as washing our hands, making sure we're vaccinated for the flu, and avoiding people who are sick.
Yeah. As we do head into the Christmas season, you mentioned some of the things we can do to kind of minimize just getting sick. Is there anything else you would add to that? I think a lot of people are wondering, should I get my COVID booster shot? Should I get the flu shot? What else would you recommend those? What would you say people can do?
Well, yes, I definitely would recommend getting the flu shot. Definitely, since here in New Jersey, for example, the flu season has started already and much earlier, just like in the rest of many of the states in the country, with increasing people coming down with flu-like illness every day, which could, of course, be severe, especially in older adults and young people. So same with COVID boosters. If you've gotten your previous COVID vaccinations, you should definitely go ahead and have a booster, especially if you're older and are living with medical comorbidities. But of course, all the other things still have to be done, such as our common sense things, such as washing our hands, if we're home, staying sick, if you're going to visit friends, to make sure that you don't usually see, to make sure that everybody there is healthy.
Yeah, hand sanitizer too. I know that's a big one in my purse. With all of the viruses going around, demand is surging for over-the-counter children's painkillers like Tylenol and Advil. Could we see shortages there, and what should people do to prepare for that?
Well, I wouldn't recommend going out and stocking up on all of it. Taking care of your family is very important, and continue to make sure they're vaccinated, as well as overall in good health is very important. You should stock the same amount of children's acetaminophen or ibuprofen or whatever pain medication you do as usually, because the more we stock up, the less they'll be available. And I do have faith that there'll be plenty for all of us.
Yeah, yeah. We all remember, these last couple of years and family get-togethers and testing for COVID and, all wanting to not get other people sick. Do you recommend people this year COVID test before getting together with family and friends?
Well, if you're going to be visiting people you spend time with, usually like in your home, for example, people that live with you, that usually is fine, because these are the same people you see every day. If you're planning on seeing family and friends that do not live with you, and you want to be extra sure, you could always do a rapid COVID test before you visit and before you see them.
All right, Diana Finkel at I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that people could still be asymptomatic and still be able to transmit several days before the test positive. That's why it's always important to also make sure that we're up to date on all our vaccinations and are in our best state of health that we can be.
All right, Diana, we will leave it there. We appreciate you coming on tonight. Diana Finkel at Rutgers Medical School. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Twitter files up next. After his Twitter takeover, billionaire Elon Musk tweets out new revelations about the Hunter Biden laptop scandal. The FBI is investigating power outages in North Carolina that officials say could last for days. Schools in Moore County are closed and more than 33,000 people are without power after someone fired gunshots into equipment at two power substations Saturday night. Authorities have declared a state of emergency, including a mandatory curfew from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. The sheriff not confirming if it's a case of domestic terrorism.
I can't answer that. We're looking at all avenues. That's the reason I've got the professionals, the federal folks. They deal with the domestic terrorism more than locals. So they're on board and they're working with us to determine exactly who done this.
There were concerns that the attack was related to protests against a local drag show held Saturday night. Officials say there's no evidence connecting the two. Well, here in Washington, Republicans will control the House come January. They're vowing to investigate new revelations that Twitter colluded with Democrats to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story before the 2020 election. Meanwhile, both parties are condemning Donald Trump's call to set aside the Constitution so he can retake the Oval Office. Here is CBN's Dale Hurd.
The so-called Twitter files released by new CEO Elon Musk show that just days before the 2020 presidential election, the Biden campaign demanded that Twitter scrub information critical of Joe Biden and his son Hunter from the site. And it did. When the New York Post tweeted out its story about the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, Twitter removed links and blocked those who tried to share it. It also locked the account of then White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany for tweeting about the story. The laptop, abandoned at a Delaware computer shop, contained emails allegedly showing influence peddling by then Vice President Joe Biden and possible crimes by Hunter. The New York Post reports that the FBI was also involved, warning Twitter to expect so-called hack and leak operations by state actors involving the Hunter Biden story in the weeks before the election. The ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Representative James Comer, vows to hold Twitter employees and the Democrats accountable for censoring the story.
The problem the Democrats should have is, why were they so scared of the laptop story? And the answer is because the laptop proves evidence that not only did Joe Biden lie to the American people about his involvement with his family's influence peddling and shady business dealings, it also proves that Joe Biden was a part of those shady business deals. And that's something every American should be concerned about.
The Twitter revelations led former President Donald Trump to demand a new election or be declared the rightful winner, even if it's not allowed in the Constitution. Trump said, "A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections." The White House said Trump should be universally condemned for the statement, and some Republicans distanced themselves from Trump.
This is atrocious, having anyone that would make statements like that.
Well, obviously, I don't support that. The Constitution is set for a reason, to protect the rights of every American.
The Twitter files have rekindled charges that political censorship by big tech helped Joe Biden win the 2020 election and have fueled House Republicans' plans to investigate it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, this NBA coach reminds everyone of the real royal family. And finally tonight, we shared with you images and videos of the Prince and Princess of Wales in Boston last week, including a stop at the Celtics game against Miami. And while fans celebrated the Celtics' 5th straight win, not everyone was captivated by the royal visit. In fact, when a reporter asked Celtics head coach Joe Mazzulla if he met with the royal couple, he gave this response.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph?
The Prince and Princess of Wales.
Oh, no, I did not. I'm only familiar with one royal family. I don't know too much about that one.
And Coach Mazzulla added he hoped they were Celtics fans, his response quickly going viral, some saying the comment turned them into Celtic fans for life. And we'll leave it on that festive note this evening. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.